All right, 6:32 p.m., Monday, April 5th, 2021. I'm going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded, and minutes are being taken by Gail Hunter for accuracy. Start with our opportunity for any public comment on any items not on the agenda. If there's anybody who has any comments for an item that is not on the agenda tonight, I'll speak up and I'll recognize you and give you a moment to talk briefly. Okay, let's dive right in then. Fairly full agenda. I'm going to start with an update on COVID activities in town, and get into discussions around outdoor dining also related to COVID. Greg, do you want to update on the COVID prospects?
Sure, thank you, Eli. So on the state's efforts, we have signed up for their mobile vaccination clinic, which is providing service to any homebound residents. We've been reaching out to those folks that we know about who are constrained to their home, and have been working to get them signed up to take advantage of the mobile service that's available to those folks. If someone is in need of that service, they should contact the Board of Health or the Council on Aging, and we can assist them to go through the vetting process that the state has to make sure that they're eligible for that service. So that's ongoing. And secondly, we are working with Senator Tarr's office. They've been working very hard, his staff, in trying to set up a what I'll call a mini regional clinic for Cape Ann and environ, seven communities. The 4 Cape Ann towns and Ipswich, Wenham, and Hamilton have been working with the Senator's office to see if we can establish a clinic or two in our immediate area. And they're making some progress on that, getting an application into the state, and we're hoping for some more news on that in the coming days. So that is something that we'll certainly let people know if that comes to fruition, and we'll continue to keep people posted through our website and social media postings. Assuming that the trends continue in a good way, hopefully that we will not be subject to the fear of a 4th wave, even though there's lots of talk about that, hoping that the vaccination rates can continue to ramp up and that we will thwart that 4th wave. And so I would expect that we will be opening up Town Hall, again, assuming that things track okay, probably the middle of this month. Again, we'll let folks know about that as that progresses. So those were the 3 main updates I wanted to give, and then it's on to the discussion for outdoor dining.
All right, so we've had a number of applications put in by a number of restaurants in town for looking to get permission for outdoor dining, same as or in similar parameters as to last year. And we had discussions at our previous meetings on what we wanted to allow in the way of parking spaces, tents versus no tents, etc. And tonight we're going to try to sort this out in the context of the applications that have been provided, and see if we can make some decisions here. So I think I want to go around board members who've reviewed these applications. I know we had a bunch of late coming data that came in today to board members. I'll get a chance to read the additional materials that came in today on those applications. Jeff? So I'll go around. Becky, did you get a chance to review those, the additional materials that came in today?
I did, thank you.
John?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Cursorily, not in detail, but yes, I did review them.
Jeff?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So I'd like to go around the horn here and ask board members for opinions and comments on the basic characteristics of those applications. Also, in the meantime, Jeff, after last meeting, Jeff did some research into the different towns and how they were treating sidewalk dining this time. Jeff, did you want, could you give a brief summary of what you found out?
Primarily, the concern that I raised with the towns that I spoke to is how they were interpreting different takes on 6-foot separation between tables or 6-foot separation between chairs. And pretty much across the board, except for one town, Essex, the interpretation was based on what's up on the state website, which is 6-foot separation between the tables themselves, as opposed to the chairs. Essex is going with chair to chair. And that was the primary inquiry that we were making to determine whether the different messages that had come out of Governor Baker's office, both on the website and in something that he said in one of his news conferences where he said chair to chair was what he was talking about. We came up with, I think I talked to 6 different towns, and 5 out of the 6 were saying table to table 6 feet.
Okay, so this is probably going to factor into our conversations because we talk about 1 parking space versus 2, and it figures into how many tables we'll be able to put in those spaces. So why don't we go around the board and get comments on that basic issue, the basic issue of the table distancing and the 1 parking space versus 2, and see if we're still in the same place as we were last week on that. Becky?
I feel that unless a restaurant is serving lunch or breakfast as well, that it's maybe not a good idea to have a dedicated space that's cordoned off until evening. I think that using 1 spot is probably a good compromise for retail shops as well, as opposed to giving 2 spots. And Cala's application where they talked about having 1 dedicated spot and then another one that they could go into after the retail shops close, I think is a really good idea. And if other restaurants, were interested in that, I think that's a good idea.
Jeff, you want to go next?
I just got the Cala's update, so I would prefer to wait a little bit later in the queue.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm assuming that there are 4 applications we're talking about here, and both Bravo and Ollie's have other spots that they can use besides the street. They do have other spaces to accommodate tables. They don't have the pressure that Cala's has, and perhaps to a lesser extent, perhaps Black Arrow. They're really store bound on both sides, and they really just have the street if they're going outside. Calais in particular, because the density of commercial activity is a little bit greater there. I'm assuming that the diagrams that were submitted largely kind of mimic what was done last year. Is that a safe assumption? I'm not sure if others can comment on that, with the exception of Calais, where there has been a suggestion for the second space at 5. You know, the spaces I think were largely kind of 6 feet table to table. I think that's what the story was last year, and I think that with the parking spots, if you start going chair to chair, then you really kind of stress things out in terms of the number of tables that you really can fit. I do agree with Becky that it should be no more than one space. I am interested in hearing from Calais about how the second space would work. They have a diagram here with some planters, and I assume that they would be moving planters around, but I'm curious as to what's going on. And Greg had mentioned, I think, that he had investigated some movable barriers associated with a second space. There wasn't very much that was available. This would be that second space would be downstream of the first space. So the major barrier on the first spot would be there. So it's downhill, and the chance for problems from vehicular traffic would be certainly lower when you're talking about the lower space. But I'd be interested at some point here hearing from Calais about how that second space would work with the timing, and obviously the town would have to put some sort of a sign up letting people know that that space is available for parking, but only until 5 o'clock or something to that effect. And I'm assuming also that Calais would take 100% responsibility for for moving all of the materials that are associated with that, assuming it's something that might be workable. But the applications that I see, in general, I think they're good.
Monica, before I'll have you respond to that, but I'm going to let the rest of the board members go through on the high level issue, and then we'll micro down into your comments and then do another round. Ann Harrison. And you're muted.
Have we looked at all of the other possibilities? There's space behind, which is used for parking and dumpsters, which, why I'm very uncomfortable offering a town resource to the restaurants as an accommodation. Last year, it was a crisis. This year, it's only a problem. And I'd like to know that everybody has looked, as Allie's has, I guess, at what other spaces could be used. For example, Richdale's has what was supposed to be a petting pen across the street. Perhaps the restaurant could work with the owners of the Richdale to use that space rather than take up parking spaces that belong to the town as a whole.
Eli, may I make a comment?
Eli, you're muted.
Yes, on that particular topic, or
On that particular topic.
go ahead, Becky.
For any establishment serving alcohol, they have to be right next door to the facility, and they have to be visible, and that does bring into play that space, as well as where Allie's was going around by the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how visible that is from where they are, because you have to be able to see.
Eli?
Or you have to have a manager outside at all times.
Can it be monitored by video?
Greg, do you have an answer on that one?
I think we can be creative here. I'm not overly worried about that particular issue. If we get creative, I think a camera would be something that you could agree to.
All right, so, and the question about alternatives, you had two alternatives that you were talking about there. And Greg, we did talk about the possibility of that area over by Richdale's last year to some extent. But at the time it wasn't particularly attractive, and I don't think it was available to us last year, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I'd be a little concerned about crossing the street constantly. I think that's problematic. There's no crosswalk there. So
Putting in a crosswalk is pretty easy.
it is. I don't disagree with that.
All right, so I want to come back to this when I eventually let Monica talk on the parking space, because this is really around the items that you're talking around are really around Cala's space, I think, for the most part, correct?
I think the space in back might be shared. I ownership, I don't know, but with the moorings.
Okay. Right now, we don't have an application for them.
Mm.
All right.
So Eli, if I could just I'll just interject for a minute on the Black Arrow application. They did show a pretty large space. I mean, they show 30 feet. So that's more than one space. Did seem like
Eli, if I may.
Becky, again, is it on the topic of alternate
Yeah.
spaces? Yeah, go
Yep.
ahead.
Cuttlefish that used to be there is no longer next to Black Arrow, so there's no other business in there at this point in time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to come back to the alternate space question after we get some questions and opinions from Jeff. Jeff, if you're ready.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
On the alleys application, they sent in pictures of the space and a diagram. And in the diagram, at least as I can read it, the art studio that's on the second floor is not represented, the stairway to that art studio. And I'd like to understand whether there's an acting studio that's holding hours up there, and whether the owners of alleys have secured a letter of support from them for putting the tables in the alley next to their restaurant. That's a concern in using that space. I also had a concern on the alleys application as to the two tables that numbers 7 and 8 that are over on the side of the building that's alongside the driveway going back to the hardware store and Vinnie's house. What the access is to table 8. Clearly the access to table 7 is an opening that's by the stairs. But table 8, if table 8 has to walk by table 7, that's going to be problematic in terms of distancing. It's unclear what the clearance is between the tree and table 7 on the Alley's application. And just in terms of the way it came out on the diagram that we received, it looks like 5 feet, and I think that that's fine. But I'd like to understand what that clearance is. This is on the table 7 barrier to the tree. So, and kudos for very creative space arrangements on that. I have lots of questions about the Callas proposal. And I'll wait until Monica has an opportunity to describe this a little bit better. My understanding is it's 2 Jersey barriers and then some movable planters and 3 tables in the space that would only be occupied after the retail outlets have closed. And my questions are, where would things be stored? My other question is that in the picture that was provided, there was an umbrella that had a logo for Sam Adams, and I believe that we had said that there could be no alcohol logos on umbrellas in the past. And that may or may not be state regulation as well. But I think that that needs to be addressed. I was concerned about Black Arrow taking up the 2 spaces on the 30 feet. We realized this is not a one-size-fits-all kind of application process this year. But I am concerned about the amount of space that they're taking. Even if it's not an active business where there was an active business next to them, that's a parking space that can serve 7 Central, or excuse me, Antique Table, and also the businesses across the street, including the real estate agency.
That's your list for now? Okay. So we have questions for Callas, Alleys, and Black Arrow in here, and I'm going to go around and give everybody opportunity to speak on those questions. I don't have anything really further to add, except to still lean towards, in general, one space, and supportive of the notion of not taking up a space if you're not serving up lunch. So anyway, why don't we then use this just to go off directly to Callas and talk about the questions that have been asked for you. So in there we have the questions about some more details about how you envision the 5 p.m. Second space working and being managed. And we have Ann Harrison's questions about the potential of using space behind Callas. And then a comment about umbrellas from Jeff. So why don't you take the...
Also, Eli, in that regard, just the storage question.
The storage question.
Right. Where all that material goes when that becomes an active parking space during the day.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yep. So Monica, you're up.
So last year, I would like to mention that we were required to have 6 feet between the chairs, not the tables. So that is different this year, and it would give us a little bit more wiggle room, and every inch counts right now. So I'm happy to hear that we're leaning towards that way. As far as the way I envision the second parking space working is planters that are built out of wood that have a place where you can use a pallet jack to move from the back of the building to the front of the building. I would like to use probably at least one of the planters on the end, even during the day when, like before 5 o'clock, just to keep the movement to a minimum and to it'll look nice, I think. So it would be 2 planters, and one of the tables that's in that after 5 area is blue. That one would actually remain all day. It would stay in that first parking spot. The other 2 would be added when we move these planters around in the evening hours after 5. There is plenty of space out back. We did consider that as a place. It would actually give us more outdoor dining space than 2 parking spots and the sidewalk and all that. Unfortunately, we only have 4 parking spots in there, and all of our neighbors and other tenants in the mooring also use that spot, and didn't feel as though collectively didn't feel as though it was a good option for them to give up their parking spots, because essentially it would mean they would have to give up their spots if the tent was placed out back. As far as the umbrellas go, those are the umbrellas we used last year. So if you want me to get something else, I'm happy to. I don't think it's a state regulation as far as the liquor logos go, because the vendors give us them for free, and most of the locations used those last year. And I think that's all. I think I answered the questions briefly. If anybody has anything else, I'm happy to talk more about it. Or
Okay. I'll let Jeff, I know that Jeff's going to have a question on the umbrellas. I will say that last year, regardless of what the state says about alcohol logos, the board did say no logos on the umbrellas. And I understand that last year was fairly hectic.
yeah.
But I think if the board says no logos on umbrellas, then that's what should be done here.
Okay.
Jeff, go ahead.
Monica, which of the planters are you talking about leaving there during the day? The one that's on the uphill side, or the one at the end? I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I'd like, if possible, I would like to leave the one at the end of the by the Jersey barrier. So you would just slide it up and slide it down a little bit, just to kind of create the place. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. We can move it. I just think it's a waste to have these beautiful planters and not have them out, but it wouldn't be necessary. We could use the chain and the stanchions that we used last year.
That does overlap in the diagram that you gave us. That does overlap into the parking spot that's downhill.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that we can move it up to one to where the barricade is, and then when dinner service comes, just move it down, in the middle a little bit more, just to kind of create a little bit more privacy. I feel like, I don't know if anybody has sat in any of these outdoor dining places that are on streets. I don't know, there's just a little insecurity feeling, I think, that people get, and just to make people feel a little bit more comfortable, push the barrier down into that second spot. Last year, I think we had 3 or 4 Jersey barriers on that side, so there should be plenty of room. I think the planters I looked at were 60 inches. I'd have to revisit the exact measurements of it.
Okay.
And I can send you guys pictures of, or images. I should have included that. I don't know why I didn't, of the planters that I was thinking of using.
That's fine. I mean, the main concern that I had about that was cars coming around the corner and tables being protected from cars coming around the corner, and the Jersey barriers will do that protection.
Yeah, these planters are pretty substantial. They were about 18 inches wide and about 3 or 4 feet high, and filled with dirt. And like I said, we're going to have to use a pallet jack to kind of maneuver them and wheel them around. I mean, I don't think that they're gonna stop a speeding car, but you know, something moving a little bit of a lower speed would be fine. You know, I think it would offer some kind of protection, and they're, you know, made of wood.
But we'd still be having the Jersey barrier on the uphill side.
Up on the uphill side and on the that angle.
Yeah, we did have this discussion last year about that being the direction of traffic. All right, Jeff, any other comments on this before
No.
Okay. Lauren, did you have a comment you wanted to make here?
Oh, hi. Unfortunately, I can't see the plan, so I can't visualize it, but I did want to mention that I absolutely offered all my parking spaces in the back parking lot to be used. I said we could all park up the street in the public parking.
I guess I must have misunderstood that conversation because when we had talked about it, I thought that there was a concern about your patrons driving around back to do drop-offs and deliveries and just the way that it looked back there.
Yeah, we did talk about it.
Mhm.
And then I said, well, if it came to that, I would figure it out as far as having them come in through the front door. I mean, it's not ideal at all, but it was up for discussion as an option.
Okay. Let's not try to sort this part all the way out to the end right now. I'm going to try and keep this moving and keep us vaguely on schedule, but I will come back to this. Thank you, Lauren. Any other board members for questions or comments for Monica? Ann, did you have any thing you wanted to say here right now?
Just that if they have 4 parking spaces that are theirs, that's more than 1 parking space on the street.
All right,
Yeah,
let's go
we've offered to not park, have our employees park out back and have signs made up to direct people to park out back. And I guess it was, my understanding is that because it is a difficult parking lot, I don't know if you've ever been back there to get in and out of and to kind of maneuver, and sometimes people don't park very thoughtfully back there, that it wasn't a good idea to encourage people outside of the staff and business owners to use that lot.
I wasn't encouraging you're using it for parking, but rather for tables.
No, I know we had suggested that possibly, so we get 4 parking spots back there, and we had suggested that we could have our employees park elsewhere, because that would give 4 spots for the, you know, the one, I'll say 1.5 spots we're asking for, since the second spot is going to be, we propose using it after the retail businesses close, because they all close at 5.
I think you have misunderstood me. I'm not suggesting that you offer that as a parking place, but that you put your tables there.
Yeah. It's definitely something that, you know, we talked about. I guess it was my understanding that it wasn't going to work with as many people who have access to that back lot, and the mooring who owns the back spots that are on the far corner. I haven't reached out to speak to them directly, but I know that in speaking to some of the tenants, it was my understanding that that was not the preference.
Okay. All right, let's, I'd like to come back to this one, this particular item, just because I want to be able to get through the other major restaurants who have questions outstanding for them, and then see if I can manage the time for this discussion. So stay tuned, we're coming back to that. All right, let's move to alleys, unless some board member is, if I've not let a board member speak that wants to speak on the things raised for Callis so far. All right, alleys. Couple of questions outstanding for you, Glenn and Allie. one was about the space or the tables in front of where the art studio entrance is. Have you been in touch with them? Have you talked about your plan with them? Two were the locations of table 8 and 7 that Jeff raised. And I think that was it. Jeff, you can correct me if I missed one. Anything else in that? So, Glenn? Hello.
Well, regarding the use of the space on the by the art studio, the tables where I proposed them, they don't interfere or overlap with their entrance or any of their landscaping. I haven't reached out to Kathy directly, but the landlord has given me implicit permission to use any of the space on that property there. I will do that. I assume that he had. I don't know. I haven't seen her in a while, so I haven't directly asked her. And I will if that's necessary. But I did have in the letter we sent, there was permission to use that space on the side of the building by the bank. Regarding the other seating by tables 7 and 8, that's going off to the hardware store here. It's just a simple matter of putting a gap in the rope barrier and allowing clearance to get to the other tables without having to pass through other people's personal space. And the way we have it this year, there's like way more clearance on the sidewalks than there was last year. The narrowest gap on the sidewalk is 5 feet. I think that question was raised by Jeff before, but that's so minimum that was asked of us was 3 feet, I believe. This is 5 feet is the narrowest clearance between tables. If you know the setup, this part of the property where these 2 new tables where the benches are now is partially, I mean, it's 4 feet from the building. That is part of the property that doesn't overlap on the sidewalk at all. So it's really only taking 1, 2, 3 feet into the sidewalk, 11-foot sidewalk there. So most of the clearance will be the full 11 feet width of the sidewalk, narrowing down to 5 feet at the one acacia tree there. And there's like an 8-foot clearance there. So there's plenty. I mean, you could ride your bike down these streets right now as it is. And I think there was one other question about visibility. There is a window on this side over here in the dining room, and there's one in the kitchen, which isn't off in this diagram. And Allie and I are on site every minute we're open, basically, as far as having a manager present on the property. There's always somebody there, if that answers that question. Other than that, if you have any other questions, I'm perfectly prepared to deal with them, but I like the way the setup is if it works for you.
Jeff, do you want any clarification?
I need a clarification on table 1. That appears from the picture. There's no window there, and the push out for the stairwell going up to the 2nd floor to Beach Street Studios blocks the view from the 2 windows up in the front of the building.
Right. There is 2 windows in the front of the building. This table is not visible from the front of the building. It is not. It would be visible from a kitchen window off to the back. And as I said before, there is a manager on site 24 hours a day. I mean, every minute we're open, mostly 2 managers. So it will be a supervised area. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I need to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Physically to see that.
If you ever want to come down.
Where the kitchen window is.
Yeah. It might not be the best scale, I think. But I mean, you can come down and take a look if you'd like.
Yep.
All right. Any other board members have questions for Glenn and Allie? All right, let's move on to Brendan. or Melissa or whoever is speaking for. Hi, Melissa. I see your hand. So can you talk a little bit about the layout in front of your place?
Sure. So we didn't take advantage last year because of cuttlefish and the residential above us, and we weren't really sure, what we were doing for the summer anyway. So this year we didn't really have anything to go on. So we kind of figured on the two spots right in front of the French doors, in front of the restaurant, off of the sidewalk and into the street, to accommodate 3 tables. Since we've been listening, though, we talked a little bit about maybe only cordoning off the end that's on the hill, coming down the hill, and then maybe having that second space available after 5, like Alice had proposed, that Callis had proposed. We talked briefly about maybe using stanchions and chains just to cordon it off after 5 or after 4:30 to get that second space, but.
Yeah.
We're going on nothing from last year, so we're kind of winging it.
Can I just add that we don't take using a public space lightly. Our big issue is that, like everybody else, we've been cobbled by COVID. With only 1,600 square feet, we've gone from 44 seats down to a basically takeout business after being shut down for 4 months, to only reopening now to a 20-seat capacity. So for us, we don't really have another option. There's no room out back. We can't use the alley. We've tried to be mindful of our neighbors, and we don't have the same density issue. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but we're not right downtown. We have maybe a little more to work with. And I like the idea of possibly, if you would consider us having that second spot, to be able to make it flexible where, after the real estate agent closed, that would be able to use that second spot. But with the distance involved, we really can't put any more seats in our restaurant itself. And so to keep safe and keep everyone safe, and to date, we haven't had any COVID issues with staff or customers, would like to keep it that way. We're only trying to do 12 more seats outside. I think that when you brought up the fact about the 6 feet between tables, we have here 6 feet between chairs. So that also gives us a little wiggle room. We maybe wouldn't need the 30 feet, but I think that's more than anything why we were asking for such a large area, was just so that we could try to hang on to our business, really, if we're all being honest here.
Yep.
There'd be no seats on the sidewalk. The sidewalk would be completely clear.
Okay.
Eli, I've got a question.
Go ahead, John.
In front of Black Arrow, are spaces marked?
No.
I didn't think they were.
Yeah, there's 5 total spaces from the driveway that goes back to the condos down to the crosswalk.
If people park.
That's 5 spaces, assuming people kind of say, well, I'm going to park next to the car in front of me, and they.
Yeah.
On a good day.
So it's up to the drivers to kind of define what the spaces are.
Essentially.
Okay.
We could mark them.
Yes, thinking about that.
Yeah, double-edged. Okay. Any other board members have questions for Black Arrow right now?
Would they be serving lunch?
No. Dinner at 4:30.
Okay. So to keep those spaces safe, we generally have needed there to be a concrete barrier on the up street side. So that would burn one parking space at all times.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Eli, may I comment to that?
go ahead, Becky.
I walk by there quite a bit, and now that Cuttlefish is not there, very rarely are there people parked in those spaces during the day. The only time I really see them used is when Black Arrow's open.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it'd only be hurting only be hurting our own parking.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so it's a little bit after 7:15. I'd like to see if we can get to some synthesis on board's position and decisions fairly soon. So the main topics that we've been talking about, some of them have been detailed questions that related to the particular layouts of particular restaurants. The main topics that I think we need to decide on is how where we stand on parking spaces, and where we stand on this notion of flexible parking spaces where downhill parking or down traffic parking from one reserved space might be expanded into after 5 o'clock when other businesses close. Can we go around the board and see if they're generally supportive of that concept, setting aside about the notion of whether or not alternative spaces should be used? So would the board support, in general, restaurants that want to keep one parking space in front of their business and then expand it after 5 p.m. to another parking space down traffic from where the Jersey barriers would be? So let's go around the board on that. Becky?
I'm in favor of that. I think that they're not the capacity at this point. So I think one space with the Jersey barriers to extend to another after retail shops have closed is not unreasonable.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to come to the fire chief in a couple of minutes, but let me finish going around the corner here. Ann Harrison.
Assuming that we review this monthly, so that when things open up, we're not establishing that this is a permanent change to the town, that restaurants automatically get a street parking space. Yes, if one street parking space with the possibility of opening up, of closing off another, but not starting to close until 5 or 5:30, so that people who don't have to rush out of shops to get their cars moved. No, I can live with that.
All right. John Round.
Yes, Eli, I'm also in support of that for the second downstream traffic spot where appropriate for people after 5. I think we have to talk about signage as to how that's going to be managed, because people have to understand that if they're parking there, they have to be out by 5, and how that is going to work. And I also support Ann's comment. I think that's important. It should be looked at monthly. We're in a very fluid situation, and we'd like to get out of all of this as soon as we can, but I think monthly we need to look at this and see how trends are going for the overall virus situation and how it's affecting commercial activity.
All right, let's go to Jeff.
I'm a little, I want to be as flexible as possible here, but I'm a little concerned about the second space at Black Arrow being a semi-permanent, after 5 o'clock or whatever, because there's got to be a place to store the barriers, the equipment, the tables, etc. But you're not opening until, you said 4:30? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
come right out the double doors.
Well, then I think we should either make a decision to do 2 permanent spaces there or not. Either 2 or 1. I think with that late opening and with most of the businesses around them not utilizing those spaces, we should probably go with 2 spaces there. With Collis, if, you know, a amicable agreement can be made with neighbors to use the back space, that would be the most ideal. And to include, I'm assuming that, Monica, you also want to include the front space, sidewalk space, to start with the 4 tables that are in front of your windows. Is that accurate? Or if you move to the back, that would be all you need?
I mean, yeah, we'd like to get started as soon as possible. So I think in order for us to use that backspace, it's going to take a little bit of work and a little bit of effort and coordination with the neighbors. And even if we can arrange for an agreement with everybody who uses that lot, there's some work to be done just to kind of rearrange dumpsters and clean up and that kind of stuff to make it look okay. So we would like to use the outdoor dining out front at first and then evaluate after, I guess.
So you would like the whole proposal that you've made to be implemented now?
As soon as possible, yeah.
Okay.
Does the town have a plan for, I mean, I guess not as far as barriers and that kind of stuff and installation with the DPW. So that's a question for later, I guess.
Yeah, I'll let Greg address that in a minute. Amy, I see your hand raised. I'm going to come to you in a minute or two.
Last comment on this collar proposal, Eli, is if there's going to be any street Jersey barrier, that it be angled as it was last year.
Yeah. Okay, Fire Chief, Chief Cleary.
Good evening, folks. Ultimately with this, I really haven't seen any of these plans and any of the diagrams or any of the concepts, and I'm kind of seeing them vicariously tonight. My biggest concern is diner safety, especially with barricades. And if barricades are going to be solid enough to slow down or stop a vehicle, not create an additional hazard by splintering boards or Jersey barriers that can be moved. And my concern is both upstream and downstream traffic. There's been a high incident lately in many different locations where cars have driven up onto the sidewalk and plowed right through diners because somebody missed a turn or didn't go. They were going against traffic or making a left-hand turn. So I would like at least the opportunity to maybe walk the sites based after I have the plan and see. I don't think chains with stanchions are going to be good if there's moving traffic in that area. And I know that could put a kibosh on extending one space into 2 if for some reason that everything should be a Jersey barrier. That's ultimately my concern, is the safety. I know aesthetically that doesn't help. And I know space-wise, with trying to limit people to 1, maybe 2 space, it doesn't help because Jersey barriers are not movable. I did some research myself about movable barriers, and in order for them to do any sort of protection, they have to be immovable. The plastic ones have to be filled with water. Other ones have to be filled with dirt or sand or concrete. So I can't really see the plans on the little screens tonight, but I just asked that maybe that I could have an opportunity to look at those plans, walk the sites, potentially with Chief Fitzgerald as well, because I don't know if any of the protrusions are going to affect the way traffic moves or create any pinch points. But that would be my request before final decisions are made. And that's not to slow the process down or to single any one person out, but being in charge of, from public safety, that's the way I have to approach it. Thank you.
Okay. Greg, did you have any thoughts there?
Well, so in terms of the barriers themselves, that DPW is ready to put those out as soon as you make decisions, so that can happen fairly quickly. We have talked about perhaps getting some of them painted or whatnot, but that could always happen after they're in place. For trying to make decisions, if we're approving perhaps tonight the single spaces and further discussions on the swing spaces, perhaps that's the way to go. That would give Chief Cleary some time to take a look at those swing spaces and the different options. But I think if we were to go forward with the single spaces with the barriers very similar to last year, I think that gives us all a relative comfort level.
Amy?
Hi. Regarding the back parking lot behind Cala's that we share, so it's Mari, my store, which has 2 spaces. Lauren has 3 spaces, and Cala's takes 4 spaces. That's 9 spaces, and Lauren and I have already told Jim that we were fine with that as long as he could put us somewhere else. That's Jim Brown is who I'm referring to, because he owns the parking lot, or they own it. And he's got plenty of space to put us elsewhere. So, because I don't live in town, so I can't use the resident parking, but I'm sure we can figure something out. So I am perfectly happy for them to go in the back, which I'd mentioned before. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All
Eli,
right.
a question. Were there any incidents last year with the barriers and cars?
I believe there was one at the mooring. It wasn't significant, but I think a car did hit one of the barriers and pushed it a little bit out of alignment. It wasn't a significant crash, but it did get hit.
And no one was hurt?
No one was hurt.
Thank you.
Isn't that, Greg, during the time that the restaurant wasn't open?
I believe that's correct.
And that was on the upstream side, yes?
Yes.
All right. So in the interest of time efficiency and compromise, what I think I'd like to propose is that or suggest to board members that we consider the 1 parking space initially, give the fire chief time to review with the town administrator the safety of the flexible secondary spot, and then for Cala's to go back to look at the possibility of using that parking lot space instead of the in front of the restaurant space, since it seems like that's still on the table, so to speak.
Eli?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Becky.
The one concern I would have with being out back is, again, visibility. Are there windows back there where the dining can be overseen? Or would they have to put a camera out there? And would that suffice in terms of what the state guidelines were last year? in
We
terms of
we
alcohol?
already have cameras out back, so it wouldn't have to be installed. There aren't any windows, but I wouldn't see it likely that there would be a time where there wouldn't be somebody, an employee back there during service. It wouldn't happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I think I should add in that we'll be reviewing this monthly, because we do hope that this will be a relatively short term. Not running all
Not
the way.
to complicate it, and I know we're trying to move quickly through it. If just for the discussion with the neighbors, if we do come to an agreement and use the back parking lot, I know the town has decided no tents. We would really need to have a tent out back, because we're going to have some walls to kind of hide some of the utility needs that go on in that back parking lot. So would that be something that could be considered differently, since it isn't going to be on-street parking?
I imagine so. Any board members have an issue with that being taken into consideration in the back of the Cala space? Looks like you're okay to consider that. All right.
So Eli, are you proposing that we put up barriers in the street in front of Cala's?
For one parking space. Then have the fire chief evaluate his concerns over the flex parking spaces. So we can let them get going, right, with at least one parking space.
Okay.
One clarification, Eli, for Black Arrow, maybe we need to see kind of a draft of a plan for the flex space right now. I understand that Black Arrow is only going to be open really in kind of the dinner time period anyway, but we're still looking at a flex situation with Black Arrow.
Well, and one board member proposed that we just give 2 spaces out right to Black Arrow right now.
We can do that and see how it goes.
I'm not very happy with that.
You're not very happy with
I'm not very happy with the idea that we're going to give different things to different restaurants. Let's just go with the one, study the flex, and if the fire chief thinks it can work, fine. And I think I heard Melissa say that they could move their planters or whatever and tables out from the front when they open. So maybe we could say that they could set up earlier, since they only set up their flex space earlier, since they're only open in the evening. But it should be gone during the day.
All right, Becky.
I guess, is Ann saying that for Black Arrow's flex space, that's what needs to be gone during the day?
So Ann was saying that I had raised the question of one board member had suggested that we just give 2 spaces outright to Black Arrow right now, period. Right. And Ann's not in favor of that. She says, let's just give them the 1 space right now and let the fire chief examine the flexibility, the flex spaces, just as we would be for all the other restaurants. And so that's the question.
Well, I think in terms of indoor space, I think Black Arrow has the smallest indoor space of the other restaurants. So, rather than painting with one brush, if we could, I mean, Bravo's got a great situation. They're good to go. Alley's looks like they've got enough property to accommodate their needs. And perhaps Cala's will be able to go out back. I just think trying to be creative with what each restaurant has to work with. I don't know, maybe Black Arrow doesn't want 2 spaces.
We definitely do. I mean, it'd be ideal to go down to one space. You know, to go from 12 tables and 12 seats and 2 spots to maybe 6 seats in 1 spot, but that'd be tight without, you know, because now you're dealing with a barrier where that open space would be. So you really, to go down to 1 spot, I could maybe add 5 or 6 seats, maybe.
Right.
2 spots would be ideal. Again, we didn't have anything to go by last year, so we kind of, you know, ask for what you can get.
All right, I'm gonna keep trying to move this along. Jeff, you got a comment?
I would go with 2 spaces. I think that it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. And there's more flexibility for all 3 other restaurants other than Black Arrow. We haven't heard anything from Antique Table, correct?
No.
We've gotten some information. They need to do some additional submittals to have a complete application.
Okay.
John, oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
My biggest concern with Black Arrow is in terms of doing a temporary space is the way that the traffic flows in that area and that it's a little bit narrower. The road's a little bit narrower there. So I would prefer that it had caps on both ends.
John?
I'd go with the 2 spaces. I mean, I look at it, I just think the commercial activity is pretty low in that area. I do identify with Jeff a little bit, not necessarily so much because of the road being narrower, but people are going by there faster. People are not going very fast on Beach Street in front of Callis. That's a slow area, but people are moving faster past Black Arrow. So I think safety is a bigger factor there.
Well, you need to talk to Chief Fitzgerald about that because the speed limit's the same.
Okay. All right. I'm just, you know, it's much more thickly settled in front of Callis, and people are, I think, are moving slowly.
All right, I will support the 2 spaces in front of Black Arrow as well. So here's where we're landing. For Black Arrow, they get 2 spaces. Other restaurants get 1 space to start with the chief to review the safety and features of flex spaces. Callis, no logos on your umbrellas. Callis will work with the administration and for the parking space potential of using the parking lot in back of Callis. And then we'll revisit this. We'll come back to this again at our next meeting. Monthly review on this. And I think that was the sum total of the comments tonight.
Eli, just one comment, since I'm the one who brought up the logos on umbrellas.
Yeah.
But Monica said she didn't want to use the umbrellas in the back. She wanted to use the tent. So.
Yep.
I mean, if they're doing the back parking lot, I mean, how much do we really have to say about this?
You know, I think we can be more flexible about the back parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to deal with the liquor licensing aspect of it, but other than that.
Right. Callis, I'll make one more comment. The biggest single complaint that I got in front of Callis last year was the walking space. And you got to keep that tight because I got a lot of complaints and comments about that. All right, so I think we have a position. So the board members, I'm going to go around and get a vote from board members if we support this approach. We're going to get a motion to support the features of a double parking space in front of Black Arrow, a single parking space in front of the other restaurants with the chief to review flex spacing, no logos on umbrellas, no tents, and a monthly review with Callis to look at the option of using the parking space behind the parking lot behind Callis to move to.
Friendly amendment, no tents on the street.
And no tents on the street. And Becky moved, and who's seconding?
Second.
Okay, I'll go with John Round seconding. Any discussion? All in favor, roll call vote. Jeff?
Yes.
John Round?
Yes.
Becky Jakes?
Yes.
Ann Harrison?
You're muted in.
Sorry. Yes.
And Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, well, that took a little bit longer, but I think we hashed through an awful lot of stuff in a hurry. So, restaurant owners go forth and prosper, other retailers go forth and prosper, and we will come back to as much as we can reviewing this and improving on it as we go. Appreciate everybody's flexibility and compromise here, and here we go again.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys.
Have a good night.
Thank you all.
All right. Wow, I really didn't think it was going to take that long, but hey. All right. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, a request for a utility connection at 110 Bridge Street. So this is a sewer connection. Well, Greg, do you want to go through the details?
Sure. So this, as you just said, this is a request for a sewer connection. There is a private force main in the street in front of the property. It serves a couple of other properties in the neighborhood, 3 other properties. And the owner of 110 has been talking to the other people who currently own that force main. And they are in agreement to having 110 also connect. And then it obviously feeds into the municipal sewer system. So the engineers have reviewed it both privately, and DPW has as well. They don't have concerns from an engineering perspective. There's capacity. The force main, private force main, can handle the additional flow. And so it's up to you to approve the connection. There is a connection fee that we would still require. It is a large home. It's rated as an 8-bedroom home, and so the connection fee would be the 8 times the $1,650 per bedroom. The applicant has requested your consideration of a reduction of that fee. Obviously, they have to contribute to the private line as part of their connection. And so they were asking for your consideration for a partial waiver of the fee. And again, that's for your discretion.
Comments and questions from the board. Jeff, go ahead.
I have 2 questions. The first application on this was approved by the board back on September 15th of 2014. And my questions are, how many bedrooms were being requested in September of 2014? And why the 7-year delay?
No, that was a separate property, Jeff. So that property has now been connected and is in service. And so this is a separate property.
It made it a little hard to understand where this property was because Dan Senegal didn't put an address in his letter.
Okay.
And well, I know that we're all supposed to know who's got what in this town.
Sure.
It may not necessarily be the case. So this is a 7-year separation between 2 separate and and not connected applications.
Correct.
Except by owners.
2 different owners.
2 different owners.
Yeah.
Okay. So the whole issue of mitigation in terms of the fee, that was done because the previous owner of the previous property had applied and was dragged out for a long period of time, during which the board instituted the connection fees. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So why would we give a special dispensation in terms of this particular fee?
That's for you to determine, and I would say there's no strong rationale for that.
Okay, then I'm asking that of the rest of the board too. Those are my questions.
John,
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. That was the only question I had. I don't see a rationale other than, hey, if you don't ask, you don't get. But that's the prevailing situation right now. That's the number. But other than that, it looks like all of the parties that are involved have signed off. I think you included that in Greg in the packet. So everybody knows what's going on here. So.
thank you.
Dawn, are you all set?
Yep.
Okay. What for the connection fee, what does the connection fee cover?
So we're able to make new connections as we reduce our infiltration and inflow. So these fees help fund that effort.
On rail. Oh my goodness. They took care of themselves.
Good. All right, thank you. That was my question.
Ann Harrison.
I don't see any reason why we should deny the permission to connect, and I don't see any particular reason why we shouldn't charge the regular fee.
Okay, I'm in the same position. I can't find a rationale for cutting a break on this. There was a specific reason on the original hookup, but there doesn't appear to be a reason for trimming the fee on this one. And I do support the hookup for this particular case. So can I get a motion to approve the request for a hookup for town sewer at 110?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right, let's move on to item number 3, EPA grants. Greg.
So the Cape Ann Climate Coalition and Town Green 2025 have been working with the 4 communities on a number of initiatives regarding responding to some of the challenges that rising sea levels and greater storms are having or will have in the future. And one of the projects that they pursued was a grant proposal to EPA for what is called their Building Blocks program. And this is a technical assistance program that the EPA operates. The coalition's application was one of 4 applications across the country that were accepted for this year's work in the Building Blocks program. And so that's kudos to the group that worked on that. And it will be providing, as I say, technical assistance from EPA. They will provide assistance in engaging the public in community conversations, and also making available access and assistance of sort of guiding us through their different funding opportunities that could fund projects that get identified as part of the community dialogue that are planned for the coming months ahead. So what I'm looking for this evening from you, not only to let you know of the grant award, but it would be very helpful to have a couple of members serve from Manchester on the advisory committee. It's always helpful to have a member of the selectmen be a part of that advisory group, and perhaps a citizen and perhaps someone from the planning board if there is interest. So my goal tonight is have you perhaps think about one of yourselves who would be willing to serve, and also a citizen, and or we can reach out to the planning board as well.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board, and any potential volunteers? Mr. Bodmer Turner. And Sarah Malish, I see your hand raised. I'll get to you in a minute.
Okay, I think it's incredible that we're one of 4 grants in the country to study this, and certainly Cape Ann needs to look at this very closely. So that's very exciting. I'm trying to figure out whether I can fit this into my schedule or not. If there's another board member who's got a little bit of slush in their schedule right now, I would be happy to bow to them, but I will try and figure out whether I can fit it into my schedule.
Jeff, you want to share it? I would love to do it, but I just simply cannot do it by myself right now.
Becky, was this the board, the collaboration, that the coalition that you were going to be working with because you put your hand up?
That's a different one.
Then I think you're overextending yourself, young lady.
That's the rapid recovery one.
Yeah, I know.
But I'll share it with you, Jeff. We can't have Becky get overextended.
Okay.
Is that raising your hand? Is someone raising their
Or
hand?
you, John, or Jeff,
Yeah.
or Ann, or Eli.
All of us are, but
I'm probably less overextended than most.
You want to get your feet wet, Ann?
Sure. I'm actually trying to avoid having anybody get their feet wet. That's the purpose.
water everywhere.
So are you talking about sharing, Ann, or are you talking about taking this?
I can take it, or I would be willing to share.
Let's just have Ann take it.
I will pass. Thank you, Ann.
Okay.
So I was going to go around the horn.
It's something that all of you will be kept informed on. It's, even it's nice to have one person sort of take the lead, and then we'll certainly be keeping everyone informed.
Yeah.
So I was going to go around the horn and get other questions and opinions, but it sounds like we're all very much in support of it. And Ann would like to volunteer to be on there now. I'll ask Sarah Melish. You had a comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. My only question, is there any requirement for a matching grant from the town?
No, there's not. So again, this is just a technical assistance. There's no actual money exchange from either direction.
Fantastic.
Okay. Greg, do you have what you need?
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's move on to our favorite topic. Item number 4 on the agenda, 40B update. All right, so tomorrow night the board is meeting with the developer for what's supposed to be the final make or break a decision-making process here. As of today, the lawyers are still going back and forth on the language. We hope to have a final version that we can actually discuss and chew through tomorrow. I can't for sure say that that's going to be the case as of right now, but we hope that the lawyers can get it to a halfway reasonable place. So if we have, well, the idea will be to have a document that doesn't have a lot of outstanding questions that have to be sorted out. If there are too many outstanding questions, then either we won't be able to come to a conclusion, or one party or the other will simply walk away from this. So I did want to make comment. So we have received a lot of correspondence over the past couple of weeks since our past meeting on the topic. The majority of the correspondence has been comments asking, essentially, to summarize it, that the board not endorse the LIP application from SLV and instead to endorse the proposal from the Citizens Initiative Group, SEMA, and the NDSD proposal to convert the Powder House Hill apartments to affordable housing. So I got a couple of comments to make there. First, so as I've stated repeatedly, the board was handed a local initiative project proposal from SLV for the Shingle Hill project, and that's an opportunity for the board to negotiate conditions on that development. And if we don't negotiate conditions on that development, the developer will go and do hostile 40B or conventional 40B. Either way, they end up before the zoning board. In the second version, where we don't reach a negotiation, some sort of negotiated status with them for an endorsement, we don't get the conditions that we would otherwise get with a developer. That term endorsement is a specific term that relates to the LIP process. It's official in nature. We don't currently have a proposal in front of us for the project on Powder House Hill. That's purely a private initiative. It has been proposed, an aspect of it has been proposed to run through the Affordable Housing Trust for holding some of the funds. And some presentations have been made to the Affordable Housing Trust by the Citizens Group and by the consortium that would be buying the property. But we don't currently actually have an official proposal in front of the Board of Selectmen. It may change at some point. Now, I will tell you that I personally very much like the idea of affordable housing at that location, especially with the AMI numbers that group is talking about. However, what's officially in front of us right now, what we've been negotiating for months, is the actual official proposal from SLV. So there's two aspects to the Powder House project, which I think our residents are in favor of, given my discussions with residents and given some of the letters that we received. And I'm going to mention this here because I think it's relevant because of the amount of correspondence we've gotten related to the 40B. So the two aspects are we have residents who want to better support affordable housing in town. And they think that the Powder House project does this. So the Board of Selectmen hasn't debated that because it's not actually part of the 40B proposal from SLV. It's a separate concept and it hasn't been officially brought before the board yet. Second aspect is that frankly, a lot of people in town don't want, we know that they don't want the Shingle Hill proposal to proceed. Now, as I've said, and as I said before, and I've said many times, if the developer has his way, he'll proceed regardless of whether or not this board wants them to proceed or not. So this board's been approaching it and to mitigate the potential impact of that project, the best thing to do is to negotiate with them since we've been given the opportunity. And the town council feels the same way. So a lot of residents feel like they don't want the proposal, the SLB proposal, to be able to move forward at all. That's not up to the Board of Selectmen to decide. We don't approve or deny the application. That's up to the zoning board. We only have the opportunity to negotiate conditions. So I feel like, based on the communications, the enormous amount of correspondence that we've received, the residents may have a misconception about what the choices are that the board actually has right now. Because the vast majority of the communications we've got have said the town has a choice, the board has a choice between the SLV proposal and the Powder House Hill proposal. Well, that's not exactly true. So it would be true if the town had the ability to simply approve or deny one proposal or the other. The reason the developer from SLV came to the town in the first place was we were vulnerable to 40Bs. We don't have the ability to deny a 40B. Benefits him to apply with a lip or as a friendly, but he can do it as a hostile, conventional 40B as well. So we don't actually have a choice there. The only way we'd have a choice is if we were in safe harbor. And I think there are an awful lot of residents who believe that the Powder House Hill option is nearly a shoo-in with respect to establishing a safe harbor for the town. And I think that it's important that residents be aware that it's not a shoo-in. I have watched the discussions with the Affordable Housing Trust, the presentations from the consortium that's looking to achieve putting units into the SHI through the state. And it's extremely unclear what the actual plan is, what the actual timeline is. And because of this, and this is where I think it's really relevant to the communications we've received, we don't have a choice between those two options. We have a gamble. We have a gamble that if we said just no to the negotiations with SLV, that the other project would actually do what the proposers think it will do, and telling people that it will do. And there's no clear indication that it would actually achieve what a large number of the residents want, which is to stop the 40B. It would achieve putting more units on the SHI, but it would be, quite a gamble with respect to the other thing, the other goal of a lot of residents have of simply stopping the proposed 40B development. So this board is tasked with doing the unpleasant, which is to take a very conservative view of things that represent challenges to the town and try to chart a path through that. This is the reason that we have been continuing to go down the path of negotiations with the developer. The request that the residents have been giving us with regard to the 40B is really extremely risky request. And I'm able to say this now, given the amount of correspondence that we've had and seeing the presentations in front of the Affordable Housing Trust. It's a big, big risk. It's a huge gamble. So I'm not going to really say anything further on this tonight. I think it's important that we make that clear to people. I think too many people have the idea in their heads that it's pretty much a done deal, and it's not. So tomorrow we're going to be having what we think is our final discussion with the developer. Don't know how it's going to go right now. And if we can post a reasonable version of what we'll be discussing, we will do so before the meeting, or do so as soon after that meeting as we can. Greg, do you have any additional thoughts or comments? Board members have any additional thoughts or comments? Sorry that I went on so long, but I'm thinking about this for quite a while.
I'm good, Eli, thank you.
Jeff?
Eli, I do have a comment, which is we need to separate out what's a done deal and what's not a done deal. And the financing, my understanding is the financing for this Powderhouse Hill project is very, very much completed. And it looks like the property can be obtained. What's not a done deal is the logistics and timing of creating this property as an affordable housing property, and doing all of the pieces of that. And in conversation that I had with the director of North Shore CDC, he said, I've never done it this way under this much time pressure. And typically we do this over a 2 to 3 year period. 2 to 3 years is not something that we have. And that's what's not a done deal. So we're not questioning the financing, we're not questioning the motivation, but the risk that the board takes is rolling the dice of creating a SHI listing before a hostile 40B came through.
Any other board members have any comments?
Yeah, I just might back up what Jeff says, that the gamble is time. It's a race to the zoning board. And the developer, he can go his own way anytime he wants. And he's just got to look at the timeline it's going to take him to get an eligibility letter so that he can apply to the zoning board. And getting Powder Hill on the subsidized housing list, how long does that take? And it's true that we haven't, that the North Shore Community Development has not gone through that process under this kind of timeline, but it's really a gamble of time and who's going to get to the zoning board first. And that's what the selectmen are dealing with, overlaying all of this, how the timing's going to work out here.
Eli, if I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Becky.
I'm going to echo what's been said. I mean, if anybody thinks that we're not taking this incredibly seriously, and trying to do what is in the best interest for the town, given that we as a town have dragged our heels and not attended to what we needed to attend to in terms of affordable housing. I would like to applaud this effort to come up with potential affordable housing. And I spoke with Mickey from North Shore CDC as well. And he said that he never promised that this was going to be a done deal for CHI, because he can't do that. Nor does he have any fast track to get this done. There are protocols to getting places on subsidized housing inventory, and it's a process. So if we didn't do what we are doing right now by honestly trying to work on a list then we would not be doing what we're charged to do, which is to have the best interests of the town. At the forefront. Thank you.
And you have any comments right now?
Yeah, just that the agreement that we're working toward reduces the effect of SLV's project, if it were agreed to, would reduce the impact of the SLV project on the town. It would limit the number of households that are likely to have children, therefore reducing the costs to the schools. It would add significant new monitoring of monitoring of the outflow, protecting our watershed. We're working on an agreement for a sidewalk, which would make the project less remote and safer. So these are all things that we hope to get through negotiation with SLV, and which will make the project better for the town. If we were to take the advice that we have been given and just walk away, we would have a 4-story building instead of a 3-story building, and no control over the size of the units, and whatever the state gives for monitoring of the outflow of waste products from the project. So we are getting it. The negotiation can make a big difference in the impact of the SLV project on the town.
So again, we have not made up come to a conclusion on this yet. We'll see what happens to the agreement after the lawyers are finished with it, and we'll see if where we land tomorrow. Ashley Oaks, you had a comment. Where'd you go?
Yes, no, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button. I was trying to unmute. I am here. I noticed your emphasis on saying that there was, yes. Can you hear me?
Your sound quality was going in and out. So try again.
Okay, hi. So I noticed you emphasized official proposal not being in front of you from the PHL project. And I was wondering, and maybe this is a technicality for John Whitten, but were the North Shore CDC to make an application, a building permit application, would that qualify them to hold the first place position with the DHCD? And then assuming that they had the right number of income qualified folks, would they be able to hold that first place in line in front of SLV?
So I can wade in a little bit here.
Yeah.
In order to begin the comprehensive permitting process, meaning getting before the ZBA, any applicant needs the letter of appropriateness from the state. At this point, neither project has that. SLV is trying to get that letter via the LIP process. North Shore CDC could do a similar approach as well. But both need to go through the same process. So both need to get their letters of appropriateness before they can apply to the ZBA. There are 2 paths for that letter of appropriateness. One is through the LIP, one is through a conventional 40B.
Okay, I guess I see that Danny also has his hand raised. I read some of the state regulations that did say that the building permit application does qualify as the safe harbor, and it's the date of application, not the date of approval. So I was just wondering if we could all double check that and get on the same page, and if we could that could be communicated with our group so that we could try to change the gamble. I understand that it's a gamble, and I understand that everything that you are saying, but I'm wondering if we can be educated based on your knowledge as to how to make our chances better. Thanks.
Yeah, I would certainly defer to John Witten. He's more of an expert than me on that. So if he has additional comments, Eli, you could have him provide that.
Mr. Chairman, the members of the board, I'm happy to comment. I think part of the issue is the vagueness of this alternative proposal, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean it in terms of timing. In order to get units counted on the SHI, there is a established process which is pretty clear cut. The units are petitioned to DHCD, and if they are not constructed as or occupied as part of a comprehensive permit, there are other alternatives. In that case, where the alternative approach is pursued, the units are submitted unit by unit when they meet the minimum requirements to be counted on the SHI. They are restricted as to occupancy. They are compliant with a fair housing marketing plan, a lottery, so to speak, and they otherwise meet the guidelines for DHCD inclusion on the SHI. By virtue of being constructed through a comprehensive permit, they will always count on the SHI. If they're a rental project, 100% of the units will count. If it's a for sale project, 25% of the units count. So the issue that Ms. Oakes just mentioned about the building permit is relevant only insofar as units that are constructed not through a comprehensive permit, or units that were constructed through a comprehensive permit, approved through a comprehensive permit, but no building permit was issued within 1 year. So that's where the relevance of the building permit comes in. The race to meet safe harbor is tenuous, because in order to retrofit a project, DHCD has to be sure that it meets these minimum requirements. Deed restricted, part of a fair housing plan, otherwise compliant with DHCD's requirements. So it's not impossible at all. It's just a more complicated and discretionary process now in DHCD's hands. The comprehensive permit is the more straightforward approach to getting units counted on the SHI, but it's not the only approach. But it is a tried and true approach. Once the comprehensive permit is issued without an appeal, then the units will count for 1 year. If a building permit is not issued within 1 year, then the units will count when the building permits are issued. So that's the distinction between the comprehensive permit approach and the approach that is being discussed here in town.
Denny Hall, you had a comment, Mac?
Yeah, first of all, thank you all for dealing with a very, very difficult set of circumstances. As I'd like to point out that, in my opinion, as someone who is in the affordable housing business, there is a concern as between a friendly lip and an unfriendly lip. The unfriendly lip would basically obviate the town's the negotiations that the Board of Selectmen have engaged in. And there is, however, an organization called the Housing Appeals Committee, which is the ultimate arbiter in the event that there is a disagreement with regard to the unfriendly 40B. And in my experience, which unfortunately runs about 50 years, this is the worst conceived project in my 50-year experience. And it is my belief that should the Board of Selectmen choose to deny this and the developer goes to the quote unfriendly 40B, that ultimately the Housing Appeals Committee will rule against the developer on the basis that this is a health and safety issue of the extreme. The access road, which is 190 feet, ending in a cul-de-sac, ends up raising all sorts of issues with respect to health and life safety. Can you imagine a fire where the fire trucks come up and nobody can leave because the road isn't sufficiently wide to accommodate both the fire truck and any people seeking to get away from the fire? Can you imagine somebody going down this steep grade, which in some places is 8%, and sliding into the middle of School Street? So while it is a risk, I think it's a takeable risk. The difference between a friendly 40B, which the selectmen in good faith have negotiated, and an unfriendly 40B is roughly, I don't know, $700,000 or $800,000, maybe $1 million up front. But the consequences of it are so extreme that it's worth taking that risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I appreciate the care of your comments. Sandy.
Hi, thanks. Sandy Rogers, Old Essex Road. A while back, there were some heated discussions around the environmental waivers, and then have noticed that the negotiations moved on to talk about sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera. Where does the board now stand regarding the request for waivers for, I think there were 19 of them or so. And you know, has SLV sort of walked away from that, not demanding that as part of anything positive, if in fact that's the way it goes? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Whitten pointed out during those conversations at the time that the developer didn't actually have a right to waivers. He has to apply for each and every one of them, and that was something that was going to be resolved through the zoning board anyway.
What happened?
So that provision was dropped from consideration. The developer still seeks a political statement from the board with respect to waivers and support from the board, but is not seeking a particular condition outside of that political support. The actual statement of that political support is one of the issues that remains to be sorted out in the contract. Mr. Whitten, did you have anything to add there?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think you've said it well. I just, if I could though, just comment on Mr. Hall's comment, which I appreciate and defer to his experience in town. I just want to share kind of my experience with the Housing Appeals Committee, and I suspect counsel for the citizens group will agree with me. I've been before the Housing Appeals Committee for many projects on behalf of cities and towns and abutters throughout the Commonwealth. It is the most unfair, undemocratic, unreasonable, and arbitrary agency I've ever encountered in my professional practice. Any practitioner who's been before the Housing Appeals Committee will agree with me. It's not a fair process. The committee continually ignores the facts and the law because it is a mission-driven agency. So in the Housing Appeals Committee's existence, you can count on two hands the number of times a municipality has been upheld on a denial, and you can count on the same number of hands the number of times a municipality has been upheld with approval with conditions. And the examples are legion. I've seen far worse projects than this one in terms of health and safety, in terms of environmental degradation, in terms of threats to common sense and planning. It's a mission-driven agency. And that mission has been amped up over the past several years, approve more projects. So I am not here as to give political advice. I would never do that. I'm just here to give legal advice. And that is, rarely does a municipality prevail at the Housing Appeals Committee. And it is a very, very, very dangerous gamble. And I'm not saying it's not worth the gamble. That's up to the town to decide. But in order to prevail against a rogue 40B, it's rarely successful to take it head on. These victories are usually through subsidiary approaches, whether it's federal law or state law or other approaches in terms of trying to get a developer to be more reasonable. So I just wanted to add a note of caution. The Housing Appeals Committee's track record speaks for itself. You don't have to take my opinion for it. It's just a dangerous gamble for a municipality to take them on. And a barter group can take it on because they have other approaches, but the municipality is stuck with the regulations that binds and limits the approach. And even when the facts and law are on the town side, we have seen 45 years of ignoring those facts and law. So it's been my experience, and I suspect any attorney who's been before the committee will agree, even those who represent developers, that it is not a fair tribunal. It's not intending to be a fair tribunal. They make no bones about it. And it is a mission-driven agency to build more housing. So I just wanted to say that because it's really important to set that straight. This is not a fair shake. It's not a court. And appeals of Housing Appeals Committee decisions are reviewed by a court on the record, meaning whatever was before the Housing Appeals Committee, and the committee gets incredible deference because of their, quote, agency expertise. So very few Superior Court judges are going to upset that agency expertise. It has always taken an appellate court, the appeals court of the SJC, to overturn decisions of the SJC, of the Housing Appeals Committee. So it's a very, very tilted process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I'm going to take two more comments and then I'm going to wrap this up because we do have other business that we have to take care of tonight.
Okay, Lorraine Iavani, 28
Actually,
times.
Lorraine, there were two people already with their hands raised. So one was Ashley Oakes and then was Robert Neal. I will add you to the list. So there'll be three comments and that's it. So wait for Ashley and Robert Neal to finish. And Lorraine, if you would, are you on the phone or are you on?
No, I'm on the phone. Thank you.
All right.
On the
so
phone.
You can speak. Just wait for a minute. Ashley, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak again. I just wanted to hope that you guys really stay strong tomorrow night in the LIP negotiations. I know that two of the main points were the sidewalk and the details around the wastewater treatment plant. And I guess I got the impression that the sidewalk is legally required, given the fact that we would extend the sidewalk. So we don't need to negotiate on it. I know there's subtleties beyond that, but I felt like the law would require them to have that sidewalk anyways. And I thought that perhaps, and I'm hoping to learn more about it, if we can learn more about the Cedar Swamp Aquifer and its importance as a future water supply, particularly as indicated in our, official town documents, as being used in the past for Gloucester and as being noted as available in the future as a public water supply, that that would render the stringency of the wastewater treatment plant, a given by law. And I know that I don't understand that completely, but I just wanted to make you guys really hope that you'll stay strong, because I feel like some of these negotiating points should be a given. That's all, just last comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Bob Mule?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So Bob Meal, 114 Beach Street. So you guys are working hard. Thank you very much. Difficult project. And I will not be very long. I'd just like to say the town does not want SLV. You represent the town, you better find a way not to do it. You better tell your lawyer to find a way to help you not to do it. We don't want this damn project. If it's a 40B unfriendly, we'll fight it. So let's fight it. The town does not want this project. Please don't do anything that would help SLV to do it. Thank you very much.
Lorraine?
Okay, thank you. Lorraine Iavani, 20A Pine Street. First of all, I want to thank everyone for all the hard work. There's no question about it. But I guess this question is for Mr. Witten. If we find ourselves at the Housing Appeals Committee, and I do understand all of what you're saying, unfortunately, they're politically and maybe even ideologues in some cases. But if we did decide to actually appeal the Housing Appeals Committee to the Superior Court, what's the timeline on something like that? Is it years? What are we talking about there?
So
this is.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm all set. Did you hear? Was I clear?
You were. I was just asking, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like me to respond.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, please do.
Sure. So I do understand the question. So a decision of the Housing Appeals Committee can be appealed by any party, the appellant, which is the developer, or the board, which would be the appellee. And the Housing Appeals Committee pre-COVID oftentimes would take 2 to 3 years to render a decision. Of late, that seems to be moving a little more quickly, but I waited almost 3.5 years for a decision, most recently out of Stoneham, and we've seen other matters take even longer. So assuming the Housing Appeals Committee renders a decision, let's say in 2 years, the appeal of a Housing Appeals Committee decision has to be brought to Superior Court within 30 days of the decision. The Superior Court pre-COVID was typically taking a year. An appeal of a Superior Court decision would then go to the appeals court. That typically takes another year. So using kind of that math, Housing Appeals Committee 2 years, Superior Court a year, appeals court another year, that's 4 years. If the Housing Appeals Committee acts more promptly, they have hired new hearing officers, perhaps it's a year. But I've never seen it happen more quickly than a year, plus the appeals to Superior Court and to the appeals court. The appeal to the Housing Appeals Committee is brought by the developer. So the board is the defendant or the appellee, and the plaintiff is the applicant who appeals to the Housing Appeals Committee. If it's a denial, the burden is on the town to show that the denial was needed to protect health and safety. Those decisions are very, very rare to find in favor of the town. If it's an approval with conditions, the burden initially falls on the developer to demonstrate that the conditions approved or imposed by the Board of Appeals renders the project uneconomic, which is a term defined in the regulations. So the two different postures are important to kind of play out initially in terms of figuring out the time of a trial. The approval with conditions generally takes longer than a denial, but there's no science behind that at all. So a year to 2 years within the HAC, another year from an appeal of the HAC to Superior Court.
Okay, well, thank you. I think it's important for everyone to understand the timeline, especially in view of the fact that we have a parallel, affordable housing effort as well. So thank you, and interesting information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I think I'm gonna ask for one further clarification there from Mr. Witten. If an application, if a comprehensive permit application is laid before the town, before a municipality has reached safe harbor, that application has the option under law to continue, correct?
Yes, safe harbor is the defining moment. If an application is filed before the town reaches safe harbor, or the application itself isn't a safe harbor. For example, a large project that is defined in the regs, and in Manchester, it's a project, let's say around 150 units for argument's sake. If it's neither a safe harbor project or the town hasn't achieved safe harbor, by the time an application to the Board of Appeals has been made, the application is processed as if no safe harbor has been achieved, even if safe harbor is achieved later on. So the race, if that's a fair way of phrasing it, is the town needs to achieve safe harbor, or the project that is applied for becomes a safe harbor before the town receives a project eligibility letter.
All right.
All right. Okay, so we will proceed with the developer tomorrow. We will see where we end up with the contract language, and I imagine that it will be, well, it'll either be a very short night or a very long night. Let's put it that way. All right, I'm going to move on now to item number 7, which is a Western Woods Trails Work update. So, Greg, do you want to outline this one?
So Sue Brown and others in the Concom have been working with the Cape Ann Trail Stewards organization, volunteers who help communities maintain trail networks. And so they've been working with the stewards to put together basically a memorandum of understanding, outlining some of the stewardship work that the stewards are willing to contribute to town, and looking at what we call the Western Woods area, also Powder House Hill, and the Dexter Pond area. Those 3 trail networks would be the recipient of some of the stewardship work of Cape Ann Trails. And so what is before you is that memorandum of understanding, and looking for your support and endorsement for that to proceed.
So this is, an extension in part of the, work and the cooperative work that we did to get the Western Woods property approved for on the at town meeting last year, to approve that 12-acre parcel that increases the connectivity of the properties that we own in the Western Woods. And now we're looking to move forward on maintenance of that property as well as other properties. I just wanted to point out that this is a continued effort by the town to really work on making our conservation lands more available. And, I think it's a nice thing that the town's doing. So, board members, questions or comments?
I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, I think it's wonderful. It's great that the town is doing this and that working to make it more accessible. Under the advanced aspect, when it talked about trail stewardship services, it talked about that the town would be paying for kiosk signs, materials, things like that. And I just was wondering who would be proposing the kiosks and signs, etc. That was one question. And then later on, it talked about insurance and how cats will have their own insurance, but that the town would also be providing insurance for the Cape Ann Trail stewards. And I just kind of thought that would be, I'd like a little more information on that.
So concerning the any kiosk and trail information pamphlets, that sort of thing, that's something that the Conservation Commission would typically spearhead and work with cats on that. And we do have some trail funds that we appropriate on every other year. Typically, we're putting dollars aside for trail work and trail maintenance. So that's how that would come about. Concerning insurance, so anybody who's on public lands is covered by our general liability. And so they would fall under that same umbrella as well.
Okay. Thank you, Greg.
Any other board members? Oh. Just a note, I do realize as I'm checking things off here that I skipped over the FY22 budget discussion. We'll come back to that one in just a moment. So on the Western Woods Trail Works update, can I get a motion to support the agreement with CATS?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of Mr. Bob Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Round?
Yes.
Jakes?
Yes.
Ms. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Going back to the budget discussion. Greg?
Sure, I can do this fairly quickly. So the Finance Committee is close to wrapping up their review. Another meeting this Wednesday night. Should get across the finish line for the most part. So overall, the numbers are coming together well, and targeting tax increase of 1.5%, which is lower than our norm. Usually we're in the 2.5 range. This current year we're at 0. We made those cuts, reductions due to COVID. And this for 22, we're looking at targeting a 1.5% increase. A couple of issues that remain outstanding. One is the dispatch discussion. You've had some discussions about revisiting the possibility of going to a regional 911 center in Middleton. I know that there's been some discussions back and forth, but a decision hasn't been made whether or not we're pursuing that or want to continue to consider it but not make a decision at this time. And then the other outstanding issue that was brought up in conjunction with public safety was our whole staffing regime in the fire department. Continue to have concerns about the lack of call firefighters that we have. We've lost significant number over the years. We're down to a handful of call firefighters. So there is concern about the ability to muster a crew without having those call firefighters available like we used to. So again, my sense is that we're not ready to make that decision, but I just wanted to make sure that that was the case and that is something that will be under consideration in the future year rather than this coming year. We continue to have discussions with Essex and the school district. The school district is meeting tomorrow night and may make some modifications depending on how they anticipate some additional federal funding that might become available. They have approved a budget at 3.5% increase. For us, that would translate to a 3.2% increase because of the way the apportionment formula would fall. Basically, Essex's enrollment relative to ours has grown, and thus they would incur a higher than the 3.5. They would be closer to 3.9, almost 4%. So obviously they have some concerns when either of us go over the 3.5 mark. It really starts to pinch the budgets on the other departments. So that always becomes a challenge. So we'll hear a little bit more on that tomorrow night with the school committee. And then finally, some staffing possibilities. We have our assistant assessor who will be moving on, and that would open up an opportunity to combine the assistant to the building inspector and the assistant to the assessor into one full-time position rather than the 1.5 that we currently do. And also we have a retirement coming up in later this spring with Mary Riley leaving as our part-time grant assistant with a focus on environmental concerns and conservation. So with those changes, there's an opportunity to do a little bit of rearranging, combine the grant writing coordination role with a special projects person that would work out of Selectman's office and provide some additional support to not only our grants work, which is needed, but also on various projects that come along, and have someone who can have the flexibility to dive into those areas. I can certainly point to the 40B project as something that has taken up a lot of time, not only for you, but also in my office as well. And certainly having someone who has some ability to take on the deeper dives that's often needed while we're still trying to run everything else would be extremely helpful. So these are cost neutral. It's really just a reallocation of dollars, and it would be something looking for your support to move in that direction.
Okay. As efficiently as possible, let's go move on through this. I'm going to make one opening comment though on dispatch, just a reminder to everybody that when in revisiting the dispatch scenarios, we have done a very cursory approach so far. It's the intent of the board to go through a much more detailed proposal regarding this, and to put that forth before before the public in public forum, so that they can see what the one path or the other would actually mean, because that's not really been made very clear yet. People have guesses or broad ideas about what it would mean, but it hasn't been really written down very well for the public to consume yet. So I appreciate a little bit of patience among the residents so that they can get the information to actually make an informed decision about the pros and cons of dispatch. So, okay, board members on the other financial points that Greg was raising. Jeff, go ahead.
Just as a comment on, and I know you don't want to get into any deep detail on dispatch, but the recent situation with the hikers was a scenario that involved the 911 dispatch center guiding the police officers to the hikers where they were as they stayed in place, as they should, and being able to do that on GPS. And it was an amazing, amazing process to have that unfold the way that it did and have such a good outcome. So just as a comment. I don't have any other comments at this time.
I was thinking that John was not responding because he unmuted. John.
Okay. Yes. All right. No, it was a fine summary, Greg, and at least as far as the budgeting process is gone, everything's good. I am looking to get more information on the dispatch thing. I do agree that it's still a bit of an open question. We don't have all of the facts, but I look forward to getting more information in the coming weeks on how that's all going to play out. But I have no comments on any of the summary that you've got. Some personnel moves, I can see that, but it sounds like it's all well in hand.
And
I certainly agree that dispatch needs to be looked at much more seriously. And the thought of bringing any costs associated with dispatch to the town meeting outdoors is I think it'd be much better handled when we're further out of the COVID mess. And other than that, I have absolutely no problem with moving people around in the town hall that will make Greg's life easier or more tolerable anyway. Thank you.
Becky?
No, I agree on everything that's been said.
All right. I'm in the same boat. I support your position on the fire department and also on the rearrangement of town staff. I think the rearrangement of town staff sounds like, the way you propose sounds like a pretty good idea. All right. Anything else we needed from us on budget tonight?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right. Well, let's move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda has the board selectmen meeting minutes of March 15th, accepting a gift of stock from a resident. This is a gift of a small number of stock options or shares of stock to the Manchester-By-The-Sea Council on Aging. What town does with those is we don't actually support holding stock as part of our assets. So we receive a gift like that, we sell the stock and then treat the funds to our normal financial policies. And the last one is a memorial bench for town employees. We got a request a while ago to take the three of the benches in front of town hall and dedicate each one of them to various different, or all three of them to 3 different departments in the town. And that was reviewed by committee, and the opinion was that the benches there should be put back into the regular pool for purchase by people and designation by the Board of Selectmen for individuals who had paid for them to be dedicated. And so the proposal is that the Board of Selectmen actually use some of its discretionary budget to purchase one of those benches and dedicate it to not just the 1, 2, or 3 departments, but all of the town employees and volunteers. So that's what's in the consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Town Administrator's report.
All right, again, I'll try to be brief here. Just some brief construction updates. The revetment at Singing Beach is done, but there will be some additional work jamming the smaller stones in between the big boulders. That has still to be done. Should be done over the next couple, 3 weeks. Some additional work at West Beach is also taking place, finishing up that seawall. They're pretty much done, except for the gate area is getting some additional work. Sewer lining work continues in town. Next stretch is moving from Ashland Avenue over to Bridge Street near the marsh that comes in there. And so that'll be getting relined and hopefully getting rid of some salt water that gets into the system currently there. And then finally, the HVAC system at Town Hall, we've been anxiously awaiting its final completion. It should be done here in the next couple of weeks. They did run into a problem in activating it a few weeks ago, and those issues are being resolved now, and hopefully will be fully functioning in just short order. The question about the coach field, the scoreboard has been kicked around a little bit lately. So that board was removed during the as part of the elementary school reconstruction or the new building there. And it didn't make sense to put that same scoreboard back up because of its poor condition. And so a replacement board will be part of the field upgrade work, which is planned in the next year or so. Actually, they're looking at possibly doing both fields at the same time to see if there's some savings, both the high school field and the Brook field, coach field. So that eventually there will be a scoreboard back up in place there. Just another word on staffing. We are in the midst now of hiring a part-time assistant to the town clerk. Again, doing some rearranging a little bit. And we'll be looking for a new clerk to do both the planning board and the ZBA. Helene will be stepping down after many years serving the planning board. So she'll leave very large shoes to fill. But we are starting that process, and I will keep you posted as that process unfolds. And then the next quarterly newsletter should be out to residents very shortly, as Tiffany has been working on those on a quarterly basis. So you'll be seeing that coming your way very soon. So that'll be it for me for now.
All right. If any board members have any questions on the town administrator's report, go ahead. I will point out that I made a mistake with the consent agenda that I have to revisit. So, any questions for Greg on the TA report?
Just on item number 5, congratulations, and I hope it all went well, Greg.
Well, we're in the throes of it.
In the throes.
I'll keep you posted. Lots of boxes, lots of boxes.
Never easy.
Okay, my mistake on the consent agenda was I failed to mention the increase in the fire department fees.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This was,
And I have some comments on that.
all right, so let's just say that we took that out of the consent agenda and let's discuss it right now. Sorry, folks, but yep. Greg, do you want to describe this a little bit?
Sure. So the chief has done a review of the fees that are being charged and feels that we are low in a number of them. And basically, most of the fees, go from low of $25, most of them going up to $50.
Questions, comments from board members? And you go first.
Yeah. Rocketry. I'd like to leave rocketry at $10. It's a kid's sport. I mean, with adult supervision to be sure, but a $10 fee seems much more reasonable for something that's just fun than $50.
I don't think the chief would argue with you.
That's fine. Perfectly fine.
All right. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, just one question, Eli, if I may. Special seasonal decorations, what's that?
Chief, you want to chime in
Yeah,
on that
can
one?
you comment? Most towns aren't, it's X'd out. I was just curious. I mean, I can guess what it is, but I don't know who's.
I would have to go back and double check.
I don't know who's showing up at the fire department for.
Yeah, I mean, some of these have been in effect in a long time, and I was trying to rely on some of the other people that knew which permits were valid and which ones we did, and these were the ones that came out as keeping. But I'm happy to revisit that and get a little bit more detail as to what it actually covers.
Okay.
Eli?
Yeah.
I have a question for the chief.
Yes, sir.
There's 2 open burning permits, one for cooking, and that's in seed. But the other one is seasonal for brush. And how do you differentiate between burning brush and having a fire pit?
Well, from my understanding is that the fire pits that people are using are more, I don't want to say ornamental, but more social, as opposed to some people that really do have larger brush piles and aren't necessarily burning them in the pit. I mean, I imagine people could burn brush in their brush pit for no charge and they're not getting the open burning permit. But the benefit of that is it's contained. A lot of the other people that do the open burning, they may not have a pit that it's in, and there's a greater hazard and there's greater regulation on that than there is on fire pits on personal property.
Okay.
Where they may be burning larger types of brush or even more of it.
Okay.
But we could definitely come up and define it. I don't know that you could prevent somebody from burning brush in their fire pit if it was a small fire pit and they were feeding things into it. It would actually be safer that way than the people do a big pile and then light it off.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, so
one more thing, Eli, if I may.
Yeah.
The other new one that I have that's contained in the narrative of the letter is the additional permit charge fee. I just want to make sure that everybody saw that and that it didn't get lost, because it doesn't currently exist, and that would be a new fee that I would then add into the table. And I can explain that further if anybody has any questions.
Yes, could you, Chief? Yes.
Sure. So right now, if you were to get a permit to say a 26F to have your smoke detectors checked, and we came out and we said, no, they're 10 years old, you have to get new ones. And then we came out and we found that you got some, but you borrowed them from somebody else and they're not brand new and they're still 10 years old, and we don't pass you. And you set up another appointment, and we come back out and you replaced 9 of them, but not 10. And we fail you because they're not done. And then we go back, and then you call for another permit, another inspection. You've paid for that permit once, and there would be no limit of how many times we could come out if you kept failing. Whereas somebody else would get the permit, do it right the first time for the same fee. So in essence, somebody that continually did it wrong would be a continuous draw on us continually coming out, yet they would only pay that one permit fee. So this kind of puts the onus back on people to get it right the first 2 times. Otherwise, there's a consequence of a fee each time we come back out, because that's more gas, that's more use of manpower. It ties us up from doing other things. So it puts a greater fee on the actual user or the person that is not necessarily following the rules, so to speak, than the person that does it right the first time. So it acts as a deterrent and helps encourage people to get it right and take our encouragement and our direction seriously of how to pass the inspection or what really needs to be done to bring it up to code.
Well, the proposal here is you get 1 free re-inspection, and then if you mess that one up, it's $75 every time.
Yeah. So you get 2 inspections, plus sometimes we do a pre-inspection for somebody that wants a little direction because they're getting ready and they're not sure about their smoke detectors will come out.
Yep.
But then when it's an official inspection and then we come back again and you fail, then you would incur. So you could get 2, almost as many as 3, before you would have to pay that additional charge.
All right. Board members, got any comments on that?
Good idea.
John?
I guess it's happened. That's why he said it. You've had multiple calls on a few occasions.
Becky?
No.
So the only comment on these other fees that I would have to make is open burning cooking. So right now that's no charge, and you're proposing that it go up to, oh, no, never mind, it's no charge. I have no questions.
No charge.
Yeah, thank you. Good choice. All right.
One thing I am trying to do is see about putting the open cooking permits on the online permitting process similar to the other burn permits. That way, if it is a red flag day or no permits allowed, that people that go in to get their cooking permit activated would find out that it's a no burn day. Right now, we have no control over those once that permit's issued.
Yep, nice. All right, so do board members want to vote on this tonight, or there is one question to be raised or answered about the special seasonal decorations, or do you want to treat that as informational?
I'm happy voting on it tonight.
All right, so the one change was to model rocketry to stay at $10. That was supported by the fire chief. So can we get a motion to support the increase in fees subject to the change of model rockets back to the current $10?
So moved.
Get a second?
Second.
All right, so we'll say Jeff seconded this time around. Any discussion? All in favor, Mr. Bob Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. Sorry for almost skipping you over, Chief.
Not a problem. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right.
Eli, while we're on consent agenda, I just wanted to make sure, did the gift of the stock get a thank you letter?
It will. Okay. All right, that is all that we have for our open session tonight. So I will be taking a motion to move into executive session, not to return to open session.
So
From
moved.
Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to get, are we still doing that, Greg? Or are we, yeah, we are still doing that.
Briefly,
Yeah.
we may have to just push it off again, but
All right, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate if the chair declares an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body and the chair does so declare. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor, Mr. Bodmer Turner,
Yes.
Mr. Round,
Yes.
Ms. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Ms. Jakes,
Yes.
Mr. Bowling votes yes. All right.